Welcome into another episode of the Drum Candy Podcast. This is your host, Mike Dawson, the Chief Creative Officer for Drum Factory Direct. Before we get into this week's episode, I have a simple ask. If you haven't already, please give us a 5-star rating or a like if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you could write a review in your podcast app, that does a lot to get this show to appear in more search results so more drummers like you can enjoy the show. This week, I'm interviewing my good friend, Aaron Vishria. Aaron is currently the Director of Artist Marketing at D'Addario Percussion Products. That includes Evans Drumheads, Pure Sound Wires, Promark Sticks, Sensory Percussion. Prior to D'Addario, Aaron was the Artist Relations Director over at Tama Drums. I've known Aaron since the beginning of my foray in the drum industry. You know, I came in around the same time in the early 2000s, and we're going to cover everything from his background, how he got into that side of the music industry, some kind of ins and outs of what it takes to be in artist marketing, artist relations, and of course we talk about endorsements. So let's get to it with my good friend, Aaron Vishria.
You and I kind of came into this crazy drum industry around the same time. Maybe I was a year before you, but relatively the same time. And it was an interesting time where it was kind of it was a changing of the guard from the founders to like the next generation of people. Like Vic Firth was still around, Remo was still around.
Yeah, for sure.
I think Herb might have already passed, but Maury was still owned Promark at the time. So it was interesting time where I was brought into the industry because the founder of Modern Drummer had passed away. Like that was what opened up
Ron,
the position. Right? Yeah, Ron. So for me, it was a really interesting time to be in my mid-20s and just observing, these are the names on the products. They're still here, but it was like their last couple of years. So we were kind of witnessing who's going to take over, who's going to become the new leader in this interesting, tiny little world that we work in.
Totally. No, I think it was, we did. I mean, it was amazing because I feel like we were kind of at that age where we did come in, where there was a lot of these really heavy, like you said, the founders, the people that started these companies, these brands were still around. And, you know, we got to kind of maybe see them from a distance, maybe have an interaction here and there. But like, we've seen, I think, quite a shift in the industry in the time that you and I have been here, a lot has changed and evolved for sure.
Yeah, probably the biggest shift that I could think of. Maybe the 80s into the 90s when rock music kind of took over. That might have been a bigger growth period, but what a strain. Because we lived through we worked through the downfall of the record labels and then the
rise of social media.
Yeah, the rise of social media. YouTube was something that was brand new. I think the second year that I was in this world. I had escargot with Vic Firth for the first time in my life, though. Like strange.
That's a great story. That's a great story.
First and only time. I'll never read that again. It wasn't bad, but so I've definitely told my story about getting into the industry, but because there's a question that I think every young drummer who wants to find a job. I've even had more established professionals that want to stop touring. Like, how do I get a job in the industry that doesn't involve me hopping on a bus every day?
Right.
What was your entry into artist relations?
Yeah, great question. So for me, it came in 2006. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. Started playing drums when I was 13 or so, became obsessed. I just fell in love with the instrument and everything about it. And Modern Drummer was really big for me, which obviously there's some shared history there. But, I remember once I discovered Modern Drummer, just diving in and being obsessed. I would read it cover to cover. I would study drum setups in particular. I was really curious about the gear. I'd get an issue and go straight to the gear. So I was always interested in drummers, in gear, in just the whole thing. It was all just so fascinating to me. And, like so many of us who work on the industry side, I had aspirations of being a drummer. I thought, wow, what's cooler than, to be a professional drummer was the dream. Right. And so, but I also came from a very practical family. And so when it was time to go to college, I kind of explored a little bit, like going to music school, but it just wasn't really in the cards for me. And so I ended up going to business school, and I went to USC out here in California. That's what brought me out to California. I was born out here, but again, grew up in Tennessee, like first grade all the way through high school. So I had, a few schools I was looking at, but for me, like a big part of the draw was coming out to LA, because again, I was going to business school, but in the back of my mind, I was still kind of like trying to, figure out if maybe there's a way I could turn drumming into a career. So I studied business and marketing, and I really did actually enjoy that. I found that marketing just resonated with me. I found it really interesting. The courses were some of my favorites, and I did well in them. So I really enjoyed marketing. So when I graduated, I got a job in advertising at like an advertising agency in Hollywood. And I was working there for about a year. My nights was all like playing in bands and still just trying to play shows and gig and do what I could. So, and then I took a job in public relations in like the healthcare industry, totally random, but it was a step up. It was, a better gig. And I was doing that for another year or so. So I'm in my early 20s at this point. And I was like, then I really had the bug at that point of really just wanting to try to play. And I felt like, these were full-time jobs. Had to be there, 8:30 to 5:30 kind of thing. Leave early. It was a commute, typical LA commute kind of thing. And I was like, I felt like I wasn't able to devote enough time to drumming, or that side of it. And so I actually quit that job, was teaching lessons and doing some part-time stuff and just trying to, again, just play with bands and stuff. So sorry, this has become a long-winded story, but I did that for maybe a year and a half and was trying to make ends meet and stuff. And it was going all right, and at that point I was with a particular band that was doing some band touring and stuff. But I was starting to like question, is this the life for me? Am I cut out for this? Am I good enough? Is this realistic? And again, coming from a very practical family, my dad is a financial advisor, for example, aside from being Indian, where there's already sort of a traditional, typically career, aspirations associated with that. But being a financial advisor, so I also just had a pretty good understanding. I think maybe compared to a lot of people, I was lucky in that I really did have a good understanding of finances and just, savings and where I kind of wanted to be later in life. And so I started getting curious if there was a gig, like a job that could combine some of these things. And I had a friend who I'd gone to high school with, who had moved out to LA as well, who ended up getting a job at like a guitar pedal company. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, yeah, those jobs exist, And so I started looking around and I came across a job listing. Back then it was Monster, I think, was the main job platform. And I just came across this. I remember distinctly, it was like 2:30 in the morning one night after like, I don't know, I was probably frustrated after a show or just kind of like feeling a bit lost. And like, I remember like just jumping on a Monster and I was like, I typed in drums and marketing. Those are my keywords. And lo and behold, maybe the stars aligned or whatever, but this job listing came up and it was like, marketing and promotion specialist or something for a major musical instrument company. Didn't say which company, and it had some of the qualifications and experience. And I was like, it was kind of an entry level thing. And I was like, I think I could do this. I got really excited. I remember like, I didn't have a resume together that I hadn't updated my resume, in a while. So I remember like staying up a good portion of that night, and I wrote up, got my resume together, wrote a cover letter, sent it off. Still didn't know what the company was. And I got an interview. And only when they scheduled the interview with me did I find out that it was, they gave me the address and it was Hoshino, USA. And then they gave me this California address. And I knew right away Hoshino was the kind of parent company for Tama, because I was a huge Tama fan already. I was playing the drums. I looked up to some of the artists on their roster were some of my favorites. And so, yeah, I went in just so stoked and with pretty good knowledge of of the company, of the brand, of the products, and the artists. And I think that really helped me out. And then having the marketing background, after a couple of, I think I went through like several interviews, but I got that gig, and that was my intro to it. And then I was there for a while doing like marketing and promotional stuff, and then it eventually led into taking over artist relations a little while later, or about a year and a half later.
What is marketing and promotions? What does that mean?
Yeah, it didn't really exist at the time. So what it was an artist relations office, and there was also a custom shop at that facility for Ibanez guitars, because Tama and Ibanez, for anyone who doesn't know, they're under the same company, Hoshino Gaki, which is a Japanese company. And they only had really basically people working in the shop, and then their artist relations managers. But they wanted to start doing more marketing with the artists and needed some support. And so the first things that I was doing was like artist interviews. I mean, and again, this is back in 2006. So I remember, calling up artists on a landline, and I had like a tape recorder.
Same.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about. You did way more of these than me, but yeah, I mean, that's what it was. And I would record on a tape and then do an interview, go back, transcribe it, and then we would like post it on our website. And so it was kind of that type of stuff. It was going out to shows, to sound checks, taking some pictures of kit setups, things like that, and I was doing it for both brands, actually, for Ibanez and Tama. And it was just a lot of that type of like early grassroots, like, how do we market the artists that we're working with, and it was really just kind of the beginning of a lot of that, I think, at that time. I mean, of course, the big thing I think that had always been done was the print advertising, and in Modern Drummer and all the big, magazines, print was king back then still. Digital media was not where it was. And so those magazines and the print advertisements, to me, that was, aside from like signature products, that was like the big marketing tool that companies used to claim artists and be like, this person plays Tama, huge full page ad, or sometimes a 2-page spread in Modern Drummer. And again, I remember seeing those as a kid. But we were trying to figure out other ways to market our artists. And so that's kind of what that role was initially.
So this was early new media. I mean, websites, it's crazy to think, but it really was a new thing. Like, at Modern Drummer, we didn't think of the website as an important asset at all for years, which was shocking.
Yeah, it was. I think it was, so you had the website, you have the artist roster on the website, and then you could click into someone's profile, and that's where we would then add the interview. How many people actually went and looked at those things? I don't know. We didn't have, or we didn't do data collection or analytics or anything at that point either, but we were putting it out. We were putting it out there. And then it got into like, I remember, gosh, I mean, again, thinking about the time, like I was trying to learn some video editing software. I remember doing an interview with Dragon Force. They were huge at that time, like really blowing up. Yeah. And I had those guys in for Ibanez, and like filmed an interview and was trying to like figure out video editing. And yeah, it was all just, it was very DIY and very much like figuring things out. But it was great, incredible experience, I think. And for someone like me, like you said, you were in your mid-20s, same here. I was in my mid-20s and working for this brand that I worshiped, and getting to talk to some artists that I had looked up to and was hugely inspired by, as a kid. It was kind of surreal, really.
And it seems like a seamless transition, because if you're going out and interfacing with the artist directly, that you're automatically in artist relations without even having the title. Whereas I think it's important to differentiate, like the print media team wasn't even in the California office, right? They were.
That's correct.
That was So there was almost no way for you to get into that side of it, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. So the way that company is organized, the office I was working out of in LA was like a satellite office specifically for artist relations and the custom shop. That was a satellite office of Japan, of the headquarters of Japan. And then you had Hoshino USA's like distribution headquarters over on the East Coast in Pennsylvania, and they managed all the sales, the warehousing of gear, and the marketing. So they were the ones. There was a whole that was the official marketing department for the U.S., and they were handling the things like print advertisements. Obviously, we worked very close together. We're all the same company eventually, and so we would help secure, and it was more the artist relations manager at that time than me, but maybe help set up those photo shoots in order to get the photos that they would then in Pennsylvania turn into an ad and then send to you all at Modern Drummer, So there was a lot of collaboration, but yes, they were the official and remain the official like marketing department for the US, as I understand it.
So when did, it's a logical progression. Again, it's not like all of a sudden the job opens up where now artist relations, now you're going to apply for that. You're already interfacing with your artist. I assume it was a kind of a seamless, like, we're going to promote you to artist relations once that opportunity arises.
I think that's kind of how it happens. I think it gave them a chance to just get to know me, see what I was capable of, how I was dealing with artists. And, then I think it was about a year or so after I'd been there, they parted ways with the artist relations manager at that time. Gene, great guy, still works in the industry, techs for a bunch of great drummers. But yeah, they ended up parting ways. And then it was kind of an opportunity, I think, for me to, where they were like, hey, is this something you're interested in? We don't know for sure if you're capable, if you can really take on this role, but they gave me a shot, and I think maybe I'd shown enough interest and willingness and capability to where they were at least willing to give this kid, a chance. I mean, I didn't have any industry experience before that, but I did have a marketing background, and, communication was important. I felt like that was something I'd focused on a lot through my education, but yeah, it was a huge learning curve. It was definitely a bit of being thrown into the deep end there.
At that point, were you relieved of your duties of website content, and then you could bring someone in, or was it all just became one big job?
Kind of became one big job. Yeah. Yeah.
Funny
as it tends to do,
Are you still doing that?
To an extent. Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So,
but it's a bigger team, and it's a bigger team, and it it's structured differently here. In my current role, which I guess I should clarify is here with D'Addario, and specifically focusing on Evan's Drumheads, Promark Drumsticks, and our percussion accessories, Pure Sound. We have some new electronic products, the sensory percussion stuff. Any of the percussion products or brands under the D'Addario portfolio, I'm essentially in charge of the artist relations and artist marketing for those products and brands.
If you had to explain your hierarchy of job duties, because it seems like an umbrella kind of position, what would it be like? What would you say is these are my have to do's, these are my need to do's, these are my do them when I can kind of duties?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. It's so the title, and actually the department here at D'Addario, we call it artist marketing as opposed to artist relations, even though it encompasses both sides of it. And so I'm very involved in both sides of it. So definitely still kind of helping decide which artists we sign, helping manage a large roster of those artists. But I'm not the only one. We have some other folks as well. Steve Loebmeyer, who's been here for almost 30 years now, has a huge roster of artists as well that he continues to work with. But yeah, I mean, I basically have to determine which artists we decide to bring on for endorsement deals, and then really leading how we market and promote those artists and those relationships. So those are the core responsibilities, like managing the artist relations roster, or the artist roster, and managing the marketing of that roster. And how do we, what sort of campaign should we be doing? Who should we be utilizing for this? And not to say that it's all done, in silo. It's a team. There's a number of folks that I ask for input, that have suggestions. It's definitely a very collaborative environment with our social media team, our digital marketing, the rest of the artist marketing team. But yeah, core responsibilities are still just leading that, curation of the artist roster and the marketing efforts. And that goes to socials. So managing the social media, website, signature product development. A lot of those things fall under product development in general, not just signature product, but a lot of it's when we're thinking about developing a new drum head or a new drumstick. We'll do a lot of testing and send them out to artists to get feedback, things like that. So that's also a big part of it. So it's kind of all of those things. It really is. You have to wear a lot of hats, I think, and I think that's true for anyone in this role at a lot of companies. We're all, it's, as it's a very small industry. Everyone kind of knows each other, and we talk a lot. And I feel like everyone is kind of in a similar position where they wear, multiple hats as it relates to just managing and dealing with artists.
And again, similar to Oshino, if I remember correctly, D'Addario has a separate marketing team. So you're not writing press releases or website copy for products, that kind of stuff, right? That's a separate team.
That is a separate team. Yeah, there's a whole digital marketing team. And marketing is a huge focus at D'Addario, I would say. And so the team is we have a lot of really specialized folks, which is cool. I've learned a lot. We have like an SEO specialist, for search engine optimization and things like that. So it's a very forward-thinking, modern company, I think, that's really tapped in and data-driven. And so, yes, there's a wider team. I'm not, whereas, again, at Hoshino, and I think maybe things have changed, but it was a smaller team, and everyone kind of did a lot of different things. Probably there was less specialization, I would say, than there is here.
Mm-hmm. Let's back up. How did you get over to D'Addario?
Yeah, so I guess the Tama thing I mentioned started in 2006. Transitioned more into the artist relations manager role, I think, in 2007, and then spent a long time there, and I loved it, and I still have nothing but love for the company and the brand and all the people, artists. But I was there for about 12 years. So fast forward to 2018, and I think like anyone, I mean, I make the parallel to a drummer on a gig. Sometimes it's the best gig, but you start to sort of wonder what else is out there, maybe feel, I don't want to say stagnant, but I was curious, to learn more, to grow, to try something new. And this opportunity came along, and I started talking to the D'Addario folks, and I was really interested. It's just a very different company in a lot of ways, but not better or worse, but just different. And I thought this would be really good for me to get just a different experience, and focus. I would say that I'm focused a little bit more on the marketing side of things here, although I did do that stuff there as well. It's a little bit more of an official capacity here, and there's just, I think, I'm more involved, and that was interesting to me to tap in a little bit more into the marketing side of things. And then the specialization that I mentioned, like, I was like, wow, I could really, I remember at Tama, like, starting the Facebook page, and like, I wasn't a social media, I didn't study social media. I mean, you couldn't at that point, like, that wasn't a thing to study, So part of it was also just, just aging in that position, and then being like, oh, wow, like, there's all these people here that are doing these really specialized things. I thought it was just a really cool learning opportunity, and an opportunity to get experience in different products, and and just a different style. This is a New York based U.S. company. I'd say it's very progressive, and so there were just certain things that I thought were interesting about this that appealed to me, and so yeah, it was a completely. I left on very good terms from my perspective, and I believe from theirs. From Tama, talked to them about it, and just made that transition in 2018, and here I am, 7 years later.
Interestingly, you haven't had to move, which I think is impressive, right? You've been able to stay, but being in LA, I think makes perfect sense. Like if you were already in New York City, then of course you would go out to the Long Island office. But
I think that was
worth mentioning that because you're in LA, I think it allows you a lot of,
there's a lot of opportunities for sure. I mean, and that was something that definitely came up. When I did start speaking with D'Addario, I was like, look, I'm definitely interested in having this conversation and exploring this, but I said from the very beginning, I was like, I have to be upfront that I don't think moving out of LA is really in the cards for me. And so if that's a deal breaker, I completely understand, knowing it was a New York based company. But I'm married, I have kids, and we have roots here at this point. And I just, I felt like our life is here. And so we weren't interested in making that move. And thankfully they were very cool and open about that. And it wasn't a deal breaker, and I think they saw value in having someone out in LA. They did have some folks out here as well, a little bit more guitar focused, string focused. So I think they saw benefits, like you said. I mean, it's such a hub for artists, even, so many of them already live out here, or if not, are playing shows, touring, recording. Folks are always coming through LA. So it's a great connection point. And yeah, then you kind of get that East Coast, West Coast coverage as well.
Let's dive into the nerdy stuff here. How are signature products developed versus new products, and what is your involvement in each of those?
Sure. So we have a whole product development team, at D'Addario, and they're brilliant. And, one thing that I really love about this company and many other companies in the industry, but I really do feel like we're constantly trying to innovate and, create new products and not just, stick with what's out there that works and what we have, so the product development team is always ideating on what do we need to, what can we build? What can we create? Where are their gaps? Where are their problems? What issues can we fix that drummers have, And so, I mean, there's a weekly brainstorming meeting, that I get to sit in on, and it's really cool because there's this real desire to constantly innovate. So product development, I think it can come from any number of ways. I definitely pass feedback that I receive from artists. Folks are always like, hey, what do you guys, what if you did this or that? And if I think it's a viable idea, I'll pass it on to the product development team. And then it gets vetted by product management and product development, and artist marketing has a say, but we're not the sole determiners of, certainly not of a standard product, but even of signature product. It's a collaboration, and it's got to have buy-in from the product management team, from this, we get input from sales, whether they think that this is a viable product, and we'll do focus groups sometimes, we'll do research, surveys. We have a whole consumer loyalty program called Player Circle. So we do a lot of testing there too. We'll ask our community of consumers for feedback and even bring consumers in sometimes on beta testing of new products. So we definitely don't just think up something, in this silo and then just put it out. That's pretty rare. It's usually pretty well considered, researched, and there's a process there for sure to develop it. On the signature side, we release far less signature products than we do just regular standard, products. And it's an interesting one. I think they used to be really, really powerful and would sell really well. You know, back when you and I first got in the industry, I think it was still a really big thing, and it can be to this day. But I do believe there was a bit of saturation there with a lot of signature products coming out. And I think in this day and age, you know, a lot of people just they kind of want their own thing. You know, everybody wants their own thing as opposed to maybe playing somebody else's thing. You know, we're in that individualistic, customizable sort of society where it's like you can design your own Converse or Vans or whatever. Right. You know, it's like, and so
I was just doing that yesterday, looking at some Nikes.
There you go. And, you know, so I don't know. I mean, again, we do still put out signature products, but I think we're pretty selective about it. And, you know, I mean, it's definitely a well-considered process, and it can be a long process. Sometimes these signature products take years, you know, and people don't always get that. You know, you see something come out and it's like the reaction might be that we just did this, but in reality, it's been 2 to 3 years in development. Mm-hmm. You know, for example, we recently launched the Larnell Lewis signature stick for Promark, and that I worked with Larnell for 2+ years on the development of that stick. Wow. And it's been it's been super successful, and it's a great drumstick, and he's an amazing artist, you know. And it really was kind of one of those cases of the perfect, I think, blend of, you know, it's a product that filled a gap in our lineup at that point, because it's kind of like a 5 AB diameter, a little bit longer than the standard 16. We didn't have a standard stick in those dimensions at that point. So it was kind of filling that gap. Plus you have an amazing artist who's really highly respected as a player, but also an educator. You know, he's out there in front of people playing shows, either with Snarky or his own band or doing clinics. And he's got the big social media following, you know, and a very dedicated social media following that he's built up organically over years. And we look at all that too. It's not just the number of followers, you know. What are those followers saying? What are they interested in? You look at someone like Larnell, just as an example, and you read the comments, and people are asking so many questions about the gear. And he's always very, very, like, you know, almost every gig he does, he'll detail his setup and what he's using, and he gets such an amazing sound. And so, you know, you have to look at those things. And when you see that you have this artist who's physically out there playing shows, doing clinics, but also has the online following, is talking about gear, all the content is drumming related, music related, you know, and you have all these questions and stuff, that's when it's like, okay, this makes sense, you know. And then we put out some feelers, and he's a very international artist as well. That's the other thing, you know. We're not just an American company. We may be US based, but we're a global company. And we're always, so we're looking at things on a global level. So we'll reach out to our distributors in Europe, in Asia, in Australia. You know, would you guys purchase a Larnell Lewis signature stick? Is this something that your market, you know, you think would do well in your market? And the feedback overwhelmingly was really positive. So now we have buy-in. Well, I was super interested in it. Product management is behind it. You know, product development is behind it because it's filling a gap. And then we get sales to, you know, great feedback from sales. That's the winning formula to me. And it proved out to be true so far. You know, we launched it, I think, about 1.5 years ago, and it's been, you know, really, it's been performing really well. So that's, I guess, kind of the best way that I would describe, you know, the process of a signature product. It's got to kind of be the marriage of all these different factors to really make something meaningful in this day and age. You know, I don't think just the name alone for most folks is enough to make that product successful, as it maybe once was.
Yeah, you know? Right. Yeah. I mean, does Promark do like special signature sticks just for someone who's going on tour and they want to have some merch or something? Or is that not an
We
option?
do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
can
we
get
do.
like a 5B and have your name slapped on it if you're on a major tour or something.
Yeah, it's certainly available. It's gone through different iterations, over the years, but we're trying to scale that back up. Um, it can be tough to manage sometimes, just from a production efficiency standpoint, to do that level of customization. But I can't go too deep into this, but we're certainly investing a lot in trying to ramp that up. For more artists to be able to get those custom sticks that, again, like you said, they're not available like at retail from Promark or as an official signature stick, but for folks to be able to play on their own, just to have that. And also, if they want to purchase from us at like artist discount pricing and then resell at merch as a merch item, that is possible as well.
Would there ever be a time in the development stage where you're just like, all right, it's just not working, we got to go? Like, or is it you commit early on and you're committed, or is it there's a discussion early on like we're interested but we don't know yet?
Yes, that has happened for sure. Yeah, I have some real life experience with some artists that we had we had an agreement even, and it didn't get there for one reason or another. We couldn't land on something that both sides were really passionate and excited about, and had to just table it. Not to say that it can never come back around, but yeah, it does happen where I think there's interest on both sides, but the further you get into it, you might find that it just doesn't materialize it could be for a variety of reasons, but yes, that has happened for sure in my experience.
Now, what about something seemingly small, like the reworking of the cymbal sizzler? And did it went from Promark brand to Evans brand, right?
Yeah, so, that's right.
Like, why? and then like that seems like a seemingly simple thing. We want to have a removable chain, give 2 chains, let's just redo it. How long did that take?
Oh, it's a good question. It still takes probably a lot longer than people realize. Making stuff is hard sometimes,
right.
And there's so many components to it. The material, the sourcing of it, the rebranding. I think, that's been kind of a philosophical thing for us where, we have rebranded some more of the accessories under Evans recently. Even Pure Sound, for example, Pure Sound snare wires were kind of a standalone brand for a long time. It was one of the many brands that D'Addario has acquired over the years and brought in house. And I think we didn't drop Pure Sound as a name, but brought it under the Evans umbrella. So it's kind of an Evans Pure Sound branded product. In the case of the cymbal sizzler, yeah, I think there was a feeling that it made more sense under Evans than Promark. And I think there may have been I wasn't too intimately involved with that, to be honest, but I think that there may have been a material like sourcing change that led to reworking that, which is often what happens. Sometimes it's like a particular supplier stops making this particular component, and though we do almost all of our manufacturing in the US, you still have to get a lot of components and materials from all these different vendors and then bring it in house and manufacture. So there's so many layers to it. And I've really learned a lot. My eyes have been opened quite a bit here because we have such a huge portfolio of products across strings and cables and picks and straps and all these different brands. And so you realize, I mean, there's full-time positions that are just focused on purchasing and dealing with these vendors and getting these source materials and parts. So it can be something seemingly simple is often not so, particularly I would say, like, taking that discussion to drumsticks, for example, when you're dealing with a natural material, everything is more complicated. So now you're talking about wood and a lumber supply and not a synthetic material. It's a whole different ballgame because it's nature, you know, there's density and, you know, moisture content and all these things that come into play, you know, with when you're dealing with a natural resource. And I mean, you know, I've had the opportunity to, you know, be at the Promark factory, which is still out in Houston, Texas, and see that whole drumstick process being made. And it's, I won't ever look at a drumstick, you know, the same way again. And our expectations as consumers, you know, can be pretty high sometimes. And we're just like, why don't they do this? Or why don't they have that or this, you know? And then you realize when you actually are behind the scenes on this side of it, like, wow, there's a lot that goes into making a drumstick. And I will not take that for granted from any company, you know? And I started to, I think my perspective on just other products, even outside of the music industry, has changed as well, where you realize like some of the challenges that you know, production faces with these things and materials and just the management of all that stuff. It's really, it's pretty deep, much deeper than I ever realized before getting into the industry, for sure.
Yeah, people just complain. I remember, I don't know how much has been upgraded, but I visited Promark when Mari was still owned it. And just the tolerance of like this one, the pitch of this one versus that one would go into a rejection bin and one would get like, whoa, dude, they looked and sound like the same stick to me. I couldn't tell a difference. It was really,
it's really deep. It's really deep.
Yeah.
And
it'll still change, right? Because it'll ship and it'll dry out and it'll still
change. Or it's, you know, it goes on a sea container over to Asia and, you know, and all of a sudden it's like, wait, what happened here? You know, there's so many factors that can come into play. Like you said, environmental factors before, you know, leading to the material itself, but then also on the finished product, like you said, you know, so yeah, it's really been eye-opening. And, you know, I think that awareness has really changed my perspective on some things.
Mm-hmm. So I know that D'Addario in particular is kind of, they have a portal so artists can go in and order their own stuff. They don't have to bother you or whatever to get stuff delivered. But is there still room for certain artists to be like, I want the heaviest version of this stick. Can you make sure I get the heaviest version of that stick? Or is it at this point you get your 5Bs and they're going to be consistent and deal with it?
Yeah, that's pretty much the case. It's the latter, where, you know, the way that Promark, you know, we have this whole Pro Match system, and, you know, we try the models with Promark. The models are designed to have a specific weight range, you know. So this model, based on these attributes, you know, this length, this diameter, and the type of stick that we believe it to be, should be in this weight range. And we, you know, I think we have one of the tightest weight tolerances in the industry. And so it is a case where like a particular model should fall into a pretty narrow specific weight range. And so that you as a consumer, if you go get a pair of Promark, you know, Forward 5Bs, and 2 months later you buy another pair, they should feel very consistent. You'll feel like you're playing the same drumstick. We don't do like a heavy, like then if you want a heavier stick, you got to find a different model.
Right.
You know, and we try to have those options available. So maybe it's the 5B long or the 2B then at that point, or something in between, you know, but it's like, we don't do variations of the same model. You're not going to have a super light Rebound 5A, like, and be able to order, oh, I want to get a really heavy Rebound 5A. You know, it's the Rebound 5A is going to fit in this weight range. And we want to be really consistent with that so that you know what you're going to get. And when you reach for that stick, that next stick out of your stick bag in the middle of the gig, it doesn't feel like you're playing a completely different drumstick, you know? That's the goal at Promark.
Are you feeling artists are taking that like there's a shift in just art, the way the artists interact with you now. I'm thinking back, the glory days of rock and roll, where artist relations is almost like an element of an assistant to the artist. Like you bring the sticks to them, and then they can say, "Good job, thank you for the sticks." It seems like artists are not that type of artist. I don't see too often anymore. I don't know on your side if it's changing.
I mean, I think you raised a good point about, so we do have an automated online portal and system that artists can use to order the gear that they need, if they know what they want, that being said, part of my job and what I enjoy doing is talking to artists about gear, and sometimes, giving advice or recommendations, or someone will be like, I'm looking for this type of a sound. What do you think would work? Or I want to try something, what do you guys have in this type of range? And so that's now where those conversations, and I think it's really a positive thing, because that's where I would prefer to spend my time, as opposed to like, okay, how many pairs of 5Bs do you need and what address? It's like, we're trying to take the real administrative kind of just, busy work side of it out of the equation, and empower artists to be able to just order what they need, where they need it, as long as they know what they want. But if there's a question about products, or they need some advice, or we want to talk about marketing, the conversations that I have with artists now are much more about other stuff, but yeah, I don't ever want, I do believe firmly that artist relations, it involves a relationship, and, it's hard to have a close personal relationship with hundreds upon hundreds of artists, certainly. Right. So there are some that, especially maybe at the more like up and coming level, that are pretty much just relying on that online platform, and we don't have as much interaction with. But a lot of the higher profile artists, it's still a real, it's either in person, on the phone, or at least through text, and I'll place orders for some of those folks myself, even though they have access to the portal. Kenny Aronoff comes to mind. I've known him forever. And, it's an excuse to catch up when he needs something. So he'll call me or text me. Of course, he could put in an order on his own, but, it's a good chance to connect when someone needs something. So there is that side of it too. So it's a balancing act, I would say, between having things be automated. Certainly takes a lot of lift off of us. And I think it's really beneficial for artists to not have to rely on someone to manually place that order. Especially it allows us to have a larger roster, I think, to work with more artists when we have these automations in place. But we never want it to replace the human element entirely, And I think there's a lot of artists, I'm sure you know tons of them as well, that really appreciate that, having that actual relationship with a human being, and they want to be able to call somebody and then friendships develop too. And sometimes it's, you become friends with folks, and you chat with them less about gear, and just like, how's your family doing and what's going on in your life, and you can't have that with everyone, unfortunately, just given the nature of the job and the size of rosters at a company of this level. But it's something that I really do value and appreciate. And I don't go to as many shows or take product to people physically as I used to. You're right, but I do appreciate those opportunities a lot. That's the stuff that I enjoy the most. Sometimes it's just the real life, or the trade shows, and that's a great opportunity to connect with a lot of folks at some of these drum festivals and trade shows and things like that. That's when you can really connect with a lot of people in person. So I love those opportunities as well.
I know we talked about a bunch, just friend to friend, about drum clinics and the state of that whole world. It kind of falls in line with Signature Products in a lot of ways. Like, they were super valuable and effective for a while. They've kind of, I wouldn't say kind of, they've fallen off a cliff from my observation. Not even from the industry's interest in supporting them, but just for the community lack of interest in supporting them. I've been to a lot of clinics that are under attended, and I'm shocked. Like, what's going on? Why is this not a thing like it was? I mean, I would drive hours to go see Dennis Chambers or Virgil Donati. when I was in high school.
What was your first clinic?
Don Famularo, followed by Mike Portnoy and Bobby Rock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's why I think you did tell me that once.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was Terry Bozzio and Chad Wackerman.
Oh,
You know,
amazing.
in Memphis. I think they did it at like a music club. I remember. I think it might have been, gosh, I can't even remember what, the New Daisy, I think it was, in Memphis. And I went and I must have been, I don't know, 16 years old, because we did drive. A couple friends, guitar players, actually came with me to this super technical, heady drum clinic. And I was blown away. I mean, I couldn't comprehend any of what they were doing, you know, on the drums. I mean, Terry, you know, they're playing the Black Page and all this crazy, you know, just over the top stuff. And I was like, do I just quit playing the drums right now? Like, what, you know, we were all just sort of in awe. But yeah, because I mean, as a kid, for me, that was the coolest thing in the world, even though it was so over my head and very intimidating in a way, in that sense. I mean, it was at a venue and it was full, and I won some drumsticks that I still have to this day that I never could play because they were too heavy, but I think they were like the Chad Wackerman, maybe signatures. And so I came away with like a prize, an amazing experience. I was both blown away and terrified of the instrument, but I do think, yeah, it's changed drastically. And I attribute that to, you know, at that time when you and I were going to our first clinics, I mean, like you said, YouTube was I feel like still in its infancy, if there, right? So we didn't have the same opportunity to just go see any drummer in the world by typing in a few words on YouTube. So you had to go to the clinic, and it was valuable in that way because it was a scarce opportunity, especially for me in Memphis. And, you know, you probably growing up in like Pittsburgh, I guess.
No, Western Maryland. Yeah, it was the same.
Oh, Western Maryland. Okay.
It was the only chance I could see these magazine pictures come to life, really.
Exactly. So you kind of had to go. If you were interested, you had to. And nowadays, I think it's tough to get people out to those type of events because they can watch those drummers on YouTube all day long and never have to leave their bedroom, you know? But I also feel that it's particularly so in America. I think we're spoiled. Mm-hmm. We've been oversaturated with those type of events, and so people place less value on them. So what I will say is, globally, in Asia, in South America, those events can pull really big numbers and big audiences because I think they have not gotten them to the extent that we did, and so it's valued more. And you know, I think even in Europe, we tend to do a little bit more of the events and clinics, a bit more on the guitar side, but yeah, I do feel like internationally the dynamics change for some reason, particularly in those Asian and South America markets. But yeah, in the US, it's kind of sad that it's gone that way because you have these incredible musicians. You have a rare opportunity to go see them in person, ask a question, you know, that's what you don't get on YouTube. I mean, I guess you can ask one in the comments, you know, and they may respond. Some folks are better than others, but to me, that's different than, like, you know, being in front of somebody and getting to raise your hand and ask someone and, you know, be inspired in that moment to ask a question based on something that they say that you might not get from a YouTube video. So it is a bit of a kind of a lost art, I think. But I think there's still opportunities where it makes sense and with the right artists, you know. But yeah, it's tougher to get people out to those types of things, especially in the US.
Are you still getting a lot of requests from artists to support them, or does everyone kind of know now, like this isn't?
No, we get tons of requests.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah, we do.
At some point, it was a viable income for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I don't blame anybody for that at all. But it can be tough for us to manage because budgets have been scaled back for these type of events and for support. But as you said, I mean, it can be a great revenue source for musicians and educators. And so, yeah, we do get quite a bit of requests for clinic support. And that's one of the tougher parts of my job to manage. And that's another responsibility, although again, we have help, but making those determinations is really difficult, and managing a fixed budget, with sort of unpredictable, you don't know who's going to come, you have this budget, but you don't know what opportunities are going to come up or who's going to try to do what and ask for what, so managing that is tough.
Yeah, I can imagine. I tried to produce a few here locally, and like, wow, no one came out for this one. Why? Oh, the Steelers were playing. Oh, of course. We're competing with football. But not people going to the game, people sitting at home watching the Steelers.
Although what's interesting is I feel like live music is actually thriving pretty well. So concerts are still, it seems like they've bounced back in a really big way post COVID, and I feel like numbers are up and attendance is up and things like that, if you look at some of the industry reports. So it's interesting that people are still going out to concerts, but maybe less so on the clinic side. And I don't know why that is. I think there's something obviously that people are getting out of concerts, that even though you can go watch those bands on YouTube, just like you could watch a clinician on YouTube, but there's still something that's bringing people out to concerts in greater numbers. Sense of community. I don't know what it is, and maybe something worth exploring that we should try to tap more into with clinics, because obviously there's something that's still driving people to go to live shows and concerts. Maybe it's
definitely. I mean, I feel like, at least from my perspective, it got so deep into really kind of advanced educational stuff that, and like I said, YouTube, you can search, how do I play 5/4? How do I, you don't need someone to teach you that in a room. But what I like out of a clinic is actually hearing drums physically, air moving, hearing the person's voice physically in the room, being able to stand next to them and realize this is a human being, and they're bigger or smaller than I might have thought, and their drums sound different than what I might have expected. Like that,
totally
360 experience with an artist that's everything. I don't need them to teach me a book. So I feel like maybe the format of them has gotten so deep into, like, people aren't interested in that. They don't need that anymore. Whereas
there's just so much education. It's overwhelming.
Jim Chapin was the only guy that understood the molar method. It was some weird, mysterious thing 30 years ago, when that's just,
and now you have
arm move, dude.
I know I'm with you though. I mean, we're a similar generation, but I love to see people in real life, and I get a lot more out of that, and I get much more inspired. And so that's why, I think the beacon of light in all this is the things like PASIC and, some of the UK drum show and some of these other events where, there's enough of them in one place that you get audiences out and crowds out, because it's a couple of days of those type of clinics and events. And I come away from those like so inspired, from seeing all these different types of players, hearing the drums, hearing them physically in the room, like you said, hearing their stories, their experiences. Like, I always come back from those shows like feeling re-energized and inspired, and like wanting to sit down at the drums and work on certain things, And so, I really encourage folks to get out to those opportunities. If you see them, come through town, because it really is. It hits you in a different way when you're in the room in person versus YouTube. YouTube is great. I mean, absolutely. We're so lucky that we have all those resources, but it should never replace the live element entirely, in my opinion.
How do you feel about trade shows now? Because again, we saw the big transition. Originally, that was the secret reveal of new products, and then it turned into new products would be announced the day of the trade show. Then it was like new products were announced months before the trade show, and it just became a glorified department store for companies to show their stuff. What is the focus for you for trade shows in your capacity at D'Addario?
Yeah, great question again. It's huge shift, of course. Some of that I think was happening naturally in the same way that the clinic shift was maybe happening, where maybe some less people were kind of coming out to some of the trade shows like a NAMM. And then obviously the pandemic, I think the pandemic had the biggest effect on trade shows more than any of these other factors we've been discussing. Because what happened was they went away for a while, but I think for most companies in the industry, sales went up.
Right.
Because there's a lot of studies and things that have been done about this, and people had more free time and hobbies went up across the board, right? Bicycle sales went up because people were biking or people were picking up sports and hobbies, but they were picking up their instruments again. A lot of people who hadn't, or they were picking up an instrument for the first time. And so, sales, I mean, not in 2020, but kind of as we started to rebound a little bit, because there was a lot of challenges, of course, initially, but I think it showed a lot of companies maybe that you don't always need the trade show, especially for bigger, more established brands. And so I think there's been that shift away from them for some of the bigger companies where, it costs a lot. And I don't think folks always realize that either. Again, it's kind of, how would you know, right? But I mean, it costs a lot of money to exhibit at NAMM, for example, and to send all those folks out and to build a booth, and you got people in hotels and meals and, just the expense of it. All that can really add up if you're displaying in a big way. And, I think that there was kind of a realization that, hey, maybe we don't need to spend that huge sum of money on this, and people will still buy these products. Now, I think it's different for an up and coming brand. If you're a brand new company making cymbals or something like that, yeah, that trade show can be very valuable for you because no one knows who you are yet, and you get to hear those products up and close and experience a brand for the first time. So I think the trade show shift is really kind of going towards a little bit of the smaller, newer companies and brands, and some of the really bigger established companies have backed away. Now we'll see how long that lasts, but I see value. I still see value in trade shows, certainly, and we haven't abandoned them, completely by any means. But I think we're still figuring it out, and there's different opinions and perspectives on whether we should or shouldn't, or how should we be there. I think we're still, we're at PASIC, we're at some of the specialized shows in particular where they're really industry specific and instrument specific, and there's folks there that are really genuinely interested in products and things like that. But it's picking and choosing those opportunities. And it'll be interesting to see where things go in the next few years, I think.
So where are you at with your relationship with the drums these days? Are you able to play? Do you have any interest in playing? Do you have time to play? I know you've got a family and everything else this stage of life, but where are the drums for you now?
Man, perpetually wanting to play more.
Yeah.
I still love the drums, as much as I did, I think when I was 13 years old, and I love the instrument. I should be so much better than I am. I should play so much more and practice so much more than I do. But yeah, it never leaves me. And thankfully I get to work in a role where they're surrounded by drums and instruments all the time. And sometimes it can work against you where, at the end of the day, maybe you don't want to go sit down to the drums, even though you haven't been playing them all day, but just because you've been dealing with those products all day. But I would say more often than not, that's not my feeling. It's more just a little bit of a lack of time and prioritization on my part. I do have a family. The job is very demanding. So those between work and family, that's the vast majority of my time right there. But yeah, I miss gigging and performing a lot. I haven't played many shows recently. So I really do hope to get, and as my kids get older and busier with their own lives, like it's definitely something I want to get back into. I mean, I just, I love it. And I just think I think it's good for the mind, the body, the soul. I mean, as we're getting older, keeping the joints moving and just all that stuff is good. The coordination, the mental sharpness that it requires. I think all of those things, I think it's a very healthy way to spend time playing the drums, and it's so fulfilling. So I'm a huge fan. I just, I want to spend more time. I hate to say I don't have time for it, because I never buy that argument. It's like, you make time, for you have to prioritize your time in a certain way. And unfortunately, I just haven't prioritized my time as much towards playing. How about you?
Well, you can see I got drums literally behind my desk, so I don't smoke, but my smoke breaks are on the kids.
Exactly.
So I
and that's great
in
too.
10 minutes every couple of hours, a half hour before my day starts. Lunch is 10 minutes of eating and 30 minutes of drumming. So and plus I'm still actively gigging a ton, so I have to be on the drums every day, or else I just won't be in shape. But some days I wish I did.
And it's obvious in your playing. I mean, you're just and so I love that. And it's a good point. Like sometimes I do, like I'll be in a meeting, or post meeting, I should say, and I'll have a little break, and I have a practice pad right next. I mean, I'm at my office today, but the home office, I got a little practice pad right next to my desk, and I'll just tinker and play some rudiments, when I have a 10-minute break, and it's great, but I would love to dive back in a more meaningful way.
Well, they're always there for you when you're ready. That's the good thing about them. They aren't going anywhere, and you don't need electricity.
Indeed. Yeah, right. You don't need much.
So when the world ends, you can still
some
play.
Sticks. I mean, I'm always tapping. It's just wherever I am, I'm drumming either in my head or on my lap, or on the desk. But to really sit down at the drum set and work on things is definitely a goal that I hope to get more into again.
I mean, you can't undersell the good fortune that you and I are both in, to where we're interacting with world-class musicians and checking out new music constantly. That is practice in a way. Like for me, it's like it establishes the bar. Like, where is this person really at? And then how close am I to that person? And what's the new music that I need to make sure I can physically play like that? I think we're both in a pretty fortunate spot where inspiration and also that osmosis is always there.
100%. That's a great point. I really do agree with that too. It's amazing how much you can learn from osmosis, like you said, just being around these world-class players. Just like you said, you do learn things that you're not even conscious of necessarily, that you're soaking up, but just hearing folks talk and hearing their approach to the instrument, and then hearing them play it seeps in. And then when you sit down, all of a sudden something comes out and you're kind of like, wait, where did that, I didn't even realize I hadn't worked on that, and something new came out, or, so that I totally agree with you. We're very, very fortunate in that way to be around it. And I think somehow that has still sustained, helped sustain my ability or whatever, to some extent, just to be around it, where it never goes away completely, even if I'm not focusing on it as much actively. There's a great artist that I started working with recently named Ruben Spiker. And, he's big into that too, just how much you can learn from observation and the power of observation. And I think it's just such a cool concept.
Yeah, we can go on for hours. I mean, the irony of I lived around New York City, but I very rarely interacted with people in the flesh. But being here in Pittsburgh, and there's a handful of world-class drummers that I interacting with constantly, has made me so much better than occasionally hanging out with Steve Jordan or something like that. Like every day I'm like, oh yeah, I see that's my friend David. He's a normal guy, but that's what the drums should sound like. I need to get closer to that. So it kind of goes back to supporting the live experience and just getting out there.
I think you're right. I mean, there's so many incredible musicians just everywhere. locally in all of these local markets and cities. And doesn't always have to be the Steve Jordans of the world, to get inspiration from. It's just,
Right.
going down to your local venue and checking out some bands. You never know what you're going to run into. There's a lot of talent out there. It's shocking, actually, how talented some of these folks are at a really young age. And also just how specialized music has become too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything that you might be into, there's, it drives me crazy when I hear people talk about how stale music is, or there's no new good music coming out. I'm just like, you're just not listening.
Yeah.
You can't just go to, the Clear Channel top 40 radio station and then complain. Like, did you spend 10 minutes, pick the most niche genre of music that you can think of, and you'll be shocked how much is coming out. So, I mean, anyone who's complaining that there's not good music coming out these days is just not paying attention, or you're just at a very cursory level of it. There's so much out there.
Yeah, Apple new releases has been my favorite. Like, what's out today? And there's another insane guitar, bass, drums record that
it's so much, and I think that's been a really positive development too. Is just kind of the accessibility that we have to all these, not having to rely on whatever the major labels are pushing, or the big radio station is pushing, but being able to find all this stuff, that whatever you're into, and it's great for music fans, and it's great for the bands, because anybody can get their music heard in a way. It's leveled the playing field a lot, which has been a great thing for music in general, I think.
I'm going to wrap it up by doing a throwback to the first season. I always ended each interview with, what was your first snare drum?
Ooh, first snare drum was the one that came with my kit, which was a Pearl export. So it was that 6.5 by 14 chrome plated steel Pearl export. But I'll add to that the first snare drum that I bought as an individual snare drum was the Chad Smith signature snare.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yes, that came out around 96 or something like that. Was it right around that time? 97?
Probably a little later for me. Actually, yeah, no, you're right. That's probably right around there. Yeah, 97, something like that.
Yeah.
When it was like, $200, $199.
It was the cheapest signature
interstate
drum
music.
out there.
It was the cheapest. Yeah, it was. And they sold container loads of them, I'm sure. And it was a good snare. I mean, again, it's like you have a huge artist and a big band, and it's like cool black snare. It was great. What was yours?
Sorry
to blow up your format, but I'm curious.
I started on a Ludwig Acrolite in school, the orange peel, and then I went through a couple toy drum sets, a Black Hawk. It was all those like Pearl stencil brands, but it was an export. But I had the export, which I didn't realize it was different than most. That has smooth shell. Most of them had like beads in it. Did yours have beads in it?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I don't think it did. I think mine was a straight shell. Okay. No beads. Yeah.
So whatever that era was, that was probably 94, 95, that shell, which I loved it. And I sold that kit for $250, and the dude I sold it to turned around and flipped it for more money right away. I was so.
And do you regret selling it?
100%. I only sold it because I was going to college and I didn't have anywhere to store it.
I sold mine too. And I also regret it. I think I got like $400 for the shells. However, I kept the snare, and it's kind of cool tangent, but my dad actually made a really cool little side table out of it. And so I actually have it as like, it was the coolest thing. I should make these and like sell them as a side hustle or something. But he took the snare, took all the hardware off of it, turned it on its side, used the holes for the lugs to, screw it to like a little platform base. And then actually took my first ride cymbal, which is a Sabian B8.
Oh, yeah.
Turned it upside down, screws that on, and then you put a glass thing right on top. And then you've got like a little side table or end table with like two of my first instruments ever. So it's a really special, he surprised me with it when I came home for like, I think Christmas one year or Thanksgiving or something. And, cause they're still back in Tennessee, and it was like the coolest thing ever. So I, at least, even though I sold that kit, I still have that snare.
And the ride cymbal.
And
you did better than me. I had a scimitar and I got rid of that sucker.
You made the right call there.
Actually, no, my first cymbal was a camber. Whoever made camber.
Oh, crash. Yeah. I think I had one of those at some point too. Yeah. Totally.
Aaron and I got to the end of our conversation and we realized that we hadn't talked about a very important key element of what it means to be an endorsing artist. So here's that last little bit of our conversation. This is all about clearing up the mud between what does it mean to endorse a product.
One of the most interesting things about endorsements that I just felt worth mentioning is just I think there's a bit of a misperception out there in terms of like who's endorsing who, you know, and I have a lot of artists that, you know, and this is pretty prevalent out there where they're like, I'm endorsed by, you know, this company, this company, this company. And a lot of folks, especially up and coming musicians, I think are seeking endorsements as like validation and credibility and thinking that the endorsement is going to help elevate their career. And it can, but I just think it's really worth noting that, you know, the way that endorsement deals work is really, these artists are endorsing us and our products. You know, they're endorsing Promark or Evans, you know, and we seek out those endorsement relationships to give credibility to our brands. And so it's just a little bit of a, you know, different way of thinking about it. But, and the easiest way that the analogy that I always draw is a sports analogy, you know, because I think it's very, it's just interesting for, you know, it's easy to understand. So, you know, the biggest endorsement deal, you know, the one that everyone talks about is, you know, going back to Michael Jordan and Nike. And if you haven't seen The Last Dance, everyone should go watch it because it's such a great series about his history and his legacy, but it was really like a groundbreaking deal at the time. And, you know, the way that it's such a great example because it's not like we needed Nike to tell us that Michael Jordan was an amazing basketball player. Michael Jordan was changing the game of basketball. And so that's why Nike wanted him endorsing Nike shoes. They were actually a really small, kind of unknown, relatively unknown company at that time. They struck an endorsement deal with Michael Jordan to give Nike credibility because he was already killing the game, you know? And so obviously not everyone's a Michael Jordan, but you take that and parallel it to the music industry, you know, these musicians, you know, the way it really kind of works in most cases is the musicians build up that credibility through their work in music, through playing shows and releasing albums, and you become influential and really well known. And then we want you to endorse our products because it gives the products credibility. If so-and-so is playing this, it's got to be good, you know? And I think that's just really important. So I would really encourage, because we get so many endorsement inquiries all the time. And a lot of times I think it's just too soon, you know, and folks should think less about endorsements and seeking endorsement, then that's going to elevate your career in some way. Certainly we can help amplify artists, help promote artists, you know, and we love to do that. But really, I mean, I encourage everyone to focus on your craft and your performance, your skills, your network, and build up that and your influence and your platform. And then the endorsements will come to you, you know, and you will hopefully have an opportunity to endorse the brands that you really enjoy. And I would be true and loyal to that too. Don't just seek out the deal or the free gear or the discounted gear, you know, with whoever's willing to offer it. I mean, the best relationships that I've ever had have been with folks that genuinely play and believe and support the products. And, you know, those are always the most meaningful and always the most impactful because they're genuine.
Sweet. Well, I appreciate you hopping on. That was a lot to dig into and kind of unveil about the whole artist relations, artist marketing world, which is, I've been in this industry 20 years and it's still like a mystery to me. So appreciate you coming on and chatting.
No, thank you so much, Mike. I mean, again, you know, as I told you, I haven't really done many of these ever. And so I really appreciate you having me, and I can't think of anyone else that I would rather, have this conversation with. We've been on this similar trajectory for a number of years, and I really appreciate the friendship.
And that's all for this week's episode. As I said in the beginning, please like, share, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating, write a review, write some comments. I saw we got 1 new review last episode, so thank you very much. But anyone else who hasn't done it yet, that's my one ask for you this week. Please give us a review and a 5-star rating to help this show spread, show up in more search results, so more drummers like you can check it out. Next week, we're going to dive into something different, so have a good one, and see you then.